I think about marijuana, for example, like it was taboo, hands off, for no purpose. And then it was like, okay, it's for medicinal purposes. And then that morphed into now it's for recreation. So, I mean,
Yeah.
there's morphs along the way of how you make these things come about. But what I was going to say, California is one of those states where in America, they do allow some of the psychedelic stuff. And so there was a friend of mine just 2 years ago, went through a really bad breakup, devastated her. She didn't know how she was going to handle it. She ended up going to one of these guided psychedelic kind of clinics, and they gave her a very small dose to start just to see how she'd react. Didn't do very much. So then the next time they substantially increased, and she told me afterwards she went into like a transcendental state, and it was, you know, cathartic, because then things started coming out and she could feel the release from that. And then she did one more, third one, before she was done, and it was more of just like make sure there's no other remnants of some trauma in there. And she came out the other end of that after getting going through this really traumatic experience with losing a fiance, and she was a new lady. I mean, it was, I saw it in her eyes. I was shocked at how healing it was. It really opened my eyes to the power of these psychedelics.
Yeah, and it's like, I always think it's like an onion. So you're always peeling stuff. And if you look at like, I don't know if you've had any like experiences yourself, but if you look at any, like each time you do it, something else is revealed. And like, I mean, I could look at myself now and think I'm a completely different person to when I first did it. And there's always things that could come up. And it's what I'm learning as well is like, each time you do psychedelics are done, because I think as well there is a time and a place, like it's not something, it is a sacred thing, and traditionally like all these plant medicines, they were sacred, they're not something to be done every week or anything, you know. And what I was going to say is like, yeah, you do notice each time that if you because a lot of the work is integration work, so you
Yes.
can have an amazing experience, but if you choose afterwards not to take into account anything that you've that you've learned, you're never, sorry, yeah. So if you don't take into account anything that you've learned, you'll never continue to grow or deal with anything.
Yeah.
Or you can be shown like so much stuff each time you do it, but you could also decide never to action anything, or never to speak to a therapist or something about it, or, you know, make the changes. So it is also, that's kind of one of the reasons why I love them, because it's always down to you as well to deal with it and to put the work in, because it's always work, okay? Like,
Yeah. Well, and look, if you went through all the trouble of bringing all that stuff to the surface to deal with it, you've got a vested interest in like following through and making sure that you come out on the other side. I can tell you the work that I've done the past 2 years. I haven't done psychedelics, but I did a lot of like therapy and talking with a life therapist slash life coach. And she was amazing. And I've had friends in my life to help work with some of those things. The next step for me is to do something like a guided session. So thank you for explaining some of that and how that works.
it's okay. I was going to say as well quickly about the psilocybin, which I think a lot of people don't talk about. So psilocybin, like mushrooms, are a fungus. So people, especially if they're doing it recreationally, they think, oh, like I just take it, and then they start getting all these, I see it all the time, like these fungal issues, especially women. Like women will get thrush and all these other issues, and it's like these medicines, like they are sacred. So it's like if you're taking it as a therapy, like for mental health as well, it's like you should also be taking probiotics to restore that
Yeah.
bacteria, and an antifungal afterwards as well, to keep your body in balance and deal with stuff. Just had to say that because I know like a lot of people can get a few issues in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. So why do you think, other than they just don't want to deal with the bubbling up of emotions of it, why do people neglect their emotions? It seems like culture puts all this huge emphasis on your physical health, go on a diet, exercise, you know, these kinds of things. But they never say anything about how you heal the brain, how you calm your mood. And of course, food and lifestyle can help with those things as well. But why do people neglect that aspect of health? Isn't it just as important to mind your mental health as your physical?
Yeah, I think some people, they just find it too much. They just don't want to deal with it. But I think even when people say they don't have trauma, I think everyone has trauma.
Yes.
And to some extent, everyone has got it. So it's like no one's, better than, I know some people have had a really hard childhoods and stuff and things happen, but also the people that think they're okay, something which it could be a trauma for me could be absolutely fine for you. Like
Yeah.
everyone's so different. But I think a lot of the time it can be too much, and they're not in the right environment as well, and they don't feel safe enough, and because of the trauma, it's very hard to even be aware of it, because you just wipe it from your memory. So when
Yeah.
you're not aware of it, you don't think you've got anything to deal with a lot of the time. And I can see when you speak to people about psilocybin or ayahuasca even, they're kind of like freeze. But it's like, I sometimes feel like it's also the fear of taking these substances and the unknown for them, because they're completely safe when you're with a practitioner who knows what they're doing, and you're in a healthy state and you're in the right place and it's legal and stuff. It's completely it's very hard, a little side effects and risks at all involved. So I do think a lot of the time it is not being ready. I mean, there's so much going on in the world now as well. So it's like there's always things building up inside of us.
I have heard that there's something on in the world right now. Back to
Yeah,
that end,
quite good.
just 5 houses down from me on my street here in South Carolina, sleepy little medium-sized town in America, there was a guy that murdered his wife and then killed himself. And it's like, wow, like we don't know the stresses, the mental state of the people around us. I never would have imagined. I didn't know the people other than I walked by their house. In fact, I walked by their house during my morning walk, literally like 15 minutes before it happened.
Wow.
If I had heard that, I would have been traumatized yesterday if I had heard that gunshot and all that would have happened from that. That would have been horrible. But that's just one example of the kinds of things that are happening in the world that people are,
Yeah.
because they're not dealing with their stresses well, they're not dealing with trauma well, and they're just letting life get to them.
Yeah, and that's why it's like I said, with dealing with all aspects of it, because it's like you can't just deal with going on a psychedelic journey and then not look at your health as well.
Yeah.
That's why I love the whole holistic picture, because it's like doing the functional testing, look at, because as well, how you said about that awful tragedy that happened. So it's also that person could have literally had a massive chemical imbalance,
Yeah.
and that can cause the psychotic issues.
Yes.
Like the zinc, the B6, I don't know, maybe there was schizophrenia due to pyrroles or something, methylation, really bad, and then ancestral trauma on top of that, which was also probably causing genetic stuff. And I think that's why as well. And then dealing with all of that, and then dealing with using psychedelics to support that when they're ready, is so important. But it's just so sad how society, and I mean, it's such a taboo as well, these psychedelics, because they really do have the power, when used correctly, to really support healing. And it'd be amazing. It's amazing as well, as I was going to say, how many times health issues go away when you really get to the bottom of things, like you were saying with your insulin resistance.
Yeah, and in my world, I talk about keto, carnivore, and things like that. Like a lot of people, they don't realize they are dealing with kind of mental health kind of issues until they clean up their diet. They start eating real, start having healthy fats, and their brain finally gets nourished well. Then they feel like this spontaneous calm come over their body. They're chill, their brain works well, they're just generally happy. And it's that should be a clue that
Yeah.
the way you eat, the way you live, all of that contributes to that malaise that you have in your brain. It's not just the trauma. Trauma's there, yes, but it's on top of eating crap that makes that brain even worse.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's if you're eating crap, you'll have all these toxins in your body. If you're not checking labels on things, if you're not eating basic and stuff, like basic food, like the vegetables, the above ground vegetables and stuff, the clean eating, you're going to have a really crappy microbiome. So you're going to have most of the serotonin, like 70%, I think it is made in the gut. You're not going to be a happy person. You're going to be full of toxins.
Yeah.
So you can't, like you said, you can't think straight. I mean, I don't understand how, I mean, we've all probably been there. I remember when I was probably about 18 and I'd eat a McDonald's. So I'd never dream of that now, because I'd know straight away like how bad I would feel. And if you look at people that are like on eating like that, like you say, you know that they're not happy, they can't be 100% happy. And sometimes you don't realize how unhappy you are until you clean up your act and start eating decent food, and you're on a completely different vibration then, because you're eating foods from the earth, so you're connected to the earth so much more. That's the thing as well. It's like we are nature. Like people always, I think, forget that as well. It's like if you're eating from the earth, you are more connected to the earth. So it's like you're going to be more receptive to natural things and to your emotions and your mind and what you appreciate in life. I mean, I can't imagine somebody who's eating like a McDonald's every day and Coca-Cola and stuff, drinking Coca-Cola, being able to appreciate nature as much as someone that's eating like an organic lifestyle, which is why people that shop in organic stores are probably more likely to appreciate the nature and stuff, because they're on that different vibration.
Well, and once you make that switch over to the more organic, the more rich whole foods kind of thing, McDonald's macas is gross. It's just ew. Like you smell it, and you're like repulsed. It's all the vegetable oils. It's all the rancid, like food-like products. And yeah, it's amazing because people think they can't come off those things when you try to talk to them about this. And I'm sure you do have these conversations with patients about it, if you moved over to more real whole foods. So, but they see the immediacy of that dopamine release that happens as a result of eating those things. And yeah, you get a big old dopamine release, but you can get dopamine in other ways as well. They think that's the only way that they feel good. They don't realize there's things you can do that are a lot healthier for you that will move you in the direction of long-term health, whereas eating that maca is going to make you go the other direction.
Yeah, it's so addictive, hey? And I think as well, I mean, how many people, the people I know that eat really well, they're also like very switched on to even everything going on. I mean, I'm not going to get political, but to everything going on in the world right now. The people that eating healthy are the ones, 90% of the ones that are switched on as well to seeing through bullshit.
Yeah.
So
I'm there with you.
I know you are, my fellow truther.
So I recently had a test done called the OAT test, the organic acids test. And so are you familiar with that test?
I've heard of it, but I haven't used it myself on patients.
So it like tests different parts of your gut health and how like neurotransmitters work and all this stuff. It's really fascinating. Look it up if you get a chance. And I know it will be something that if you have availability to it, you'll probably run it. It was about $300 for me to run it straight out of pocket and everything. Anyway, it came back with some interesting results I was shocked by. It said that I'm having problems with the neurotransmitter connection between my gut and my brain. The practitioner I was talking to, a good friend of mine, she said, but you're supposed to be sad and moody and you're like one of the happiest people I know. And I'm thinking, okay, are the ketones from my diet superseding that process and making me more nourished in my brain and thus overriding that neurotransmitter kind of pathway? It was fascinating to me.
Probably. I think that though, that test sounds a bit like the, have you heard of a GI map?
Have I had
in
what?
the gut? A GI map, it's called.
No.
It's probably a tiny bit similar, but it's more to do with like the bacteria and stuff.
Okay.
And not so much the neurotransmitters. But yeah, I think that's really interesting what you say about that keto diet, because so many times you can, like a patient can do a test and you're like, oh, that's so low. It's like, how are you even happy? Like
Yeah.
you've got like so much stuff, but then if they've got like a healthy diet, like if you're doing keto,
Yeah.
you're like living on those ketones, because I'm guessing it didn't test anything